So today we're going to begin a new unit, and we're going to be working again with a work of fiction, but this time instead of working with just short stories, we're going to be working with excerpts or pieces of longer works. We'll be doing a little bit of poetry, we'll be doing a little short story, but the first thing we're going to look at is excerpts or chapters from a much longer work of fiction called Loser by Jerry Spinelli. And we're going to continue to look at the elements of fiction that we learned in our short story unit. So just to review, remember that stories are made up of essentially 5 pieces. And those 5 pieces are things that are very important. They're important to the author, and they should be very important to the reader. They should be something that you're mindful of. They should be something you're paying attention to. So essentially, you need to be aware of the plot, which is the events or what is actually happening in a story, what your characters are doing. The setting, which is where and when a story takes place. The characters, which are the individuals that are actually in the story. So you have main characters and secondary characters, as well as the conflict, which is the problem or struggle that creates tension and moves the story forward. And then finally, you have theme. So for our sakes, we're going to be reading today, we're going to be reading the first few chapters of Loser by Jerry Spinelli. And in these chapters, I strategically chose these chapters because they are a great example of jumping right into a story's conflict. So Jerry Spinelli doesn't spend a lot of time with setting. It doesn't spend a lot of time establishing setting necessarily. And he doesn't spend a ton of time establishing his character, although we will learn a lot about the character Zinkoff in what we read today. But he jumps right into the conflict. It's almost as if he's establishing your characters and he's establishing your conflict at the same time. So the conflict is the character of Zinkoff. The conflict is the other children being different than Zinkoff. So really what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at characters and conflict. But the reason that I chose this text is because I think that Jerry Spinelli does such a beautiful job of jumping right into a story and jumping right into the meat of a story, which is essentially the conflict and the theme. And they're all sort of connected. So today as we're reading, we're going to be answering a bunch of questions, but we're really going to be focusing in on author's craft. We're going to be looking at how does Spinelli, the author, establish the conflict early on in the chapters, while simultaneously or at the same time establishing or getting to know our characters. And also, there's a hint of theme in there too. So we're going to kind of be on the lookout for that. So as we're getting in today, those are the things we're going to want to look at. Additionally, we also want to be looking at what is the conflict. So we know that there are many different types of conflict that can happen in a story. Character versus themselves, they're battling something internally. Character versus another character, which is when characters are not getting along with one another. Character versus environment, which is when nature poses a problem, which really isn't the case in this particular story, but it is in others. And then character versus society. So you want to be thinking about, in this story, in these first couple chapters, how is Spinelli establishing the conflict? What is the conflict? And then what type of conflict is it? Remember that there can be many different types of conflict. So you could have character versus character, but also character versus self. So let's get into these first couple chapters. Let's look at how Spinelli establishes our characters, our conflict, and hints at the theme of the story as early as the 3rd and 4th chapter of this book.